Imagine this. You're dressed sharp, respectful, quiet. You walk into a grand ballroom, gold chandeliers above, jazz in the background, whispers of old money in the air. Every face is polished, every shoe gleaming. But the moment you walk in, everything shifts. The eyes, the stares, and then the event manager steps forward. Not to greet you, not to help you, but to block your path. Can I help you? That fake smile that really means you don't belong here. He doesn't ask for your name, doesn't check the guest list. He just sees your skin, your calm walk, your modest suit, and he assumes you're here to serve drinks, or worse, that you've come to cause trouble. But what he doesn't know, this room isn't too good for you. You're too good for this room. And when the mayor himself walks in and wraps you in a hug that silences the entire ballroom, that's when they finally understand who you really are. This is the story of a black guest who was judged before he even spoke, and how he turned quiet humiliation into unforgettable redemption. If you believe stories like this need to be told, if you've ever felt judged before people knew your name, tap that like button and subscribe so these stories reach more people. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the city was still slick with its memory. Marcus stepped out of the black town car without fanfare. No assistant, no entourage. Just him. Tall, clean-shaven, early 30s, chocolate brown skin catching the glow of the street lamp, and a charcoal grey suit that was expensive in cut, not in branding. A simple black tie, polished Oxfords, understated, intentional. He liked it that way. Let them guess. The venue loomed ahead, a private art gallery turned event space, glowing like a jewel in the upscale district. The city's elite were already inside. Council members, philanthropists, CEOs. The mayor would arrive soon. It was invitation only. White-gloved waitstaff flitted past glass doors, and a valet in a red jacket opened the front entrance with mechanical elegance. Marcus approached slowly, umbrella folded under one arm, invitation folded in his jacket pocket. A woman in a silver gown walked past him without a glance. A group of men in navy blazers laughed loudly, but their chuckles trailed off as he passed. One of them nudged another. Their eyes scanned him like a barcode, and then came the voice. "Excuse me, sir?" Marcus turned. A man stood between him and the entrance, slim, mid-40s, pale-skinned, with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard clutched like a weapon of social control. His name tag read Event Manager, Clark. Clark gave him a smile so tight it might shatter. "I believe deliveries go through the service entrance," he said. Marcus blinked. "Pardon?" Clark's voice dropped to a more hushed tone, as if he were doing Marcus a favor. "The kitchen staff typically enters through the side door, around back." Marcus didn't move. "I'm not staff." Clark raised a brow. "Oh, then what are you doing here?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He didn't owe that. Clark continued, still smiling, but the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Look, I don't want to make this awkward. This is a private event. I'm sure it's just a mix-up." There it was, the assumption. Not just that Marcus didn't belong, but that the only way he could possibly be here was to serve others. Marcus reached into his jacket slowly. Clark stiffened slightly. The group of men nearby turned to watch. He pulled out the folded invitation, handwritten, gold-embossed, with the mayor's personal seal. Clark didn't take it. He glanced at it, then at Marcus, then back again. "Must have been some sort of administrative error," he mumbled. "You weren't on the main list." Another man joined Clark, a younger assistant, headset in ear, and clearly more nervous. He whispered something to him. Clark looked annoyed, then fake laughed, then waved the assistant off. Marcus still hadn't stepped inside. Not yet, because it wasn't about the invitation. It wasn't even about the room. It was the principle, the way Clark had looked at him, the speed with which he'd assumed, the tone, the eyes, the dismissal, the same performance black men had been handed for centuries. Marcus exhaled calmly. "Do you treat all your guests this way?" he asked softly. Clark looked suddenly flustered. "Let's not make this into something it's not." Marcus looked him dead in the eye. "It's already something." And then, like fate playing conductor, the air changed. A black SUV rolled up. A small cheer rippled from inside the gallery. The mayor had arrived. Clark turned quickly, eager to greet his important guest. He stepped aside just slightly. The SUV door opened, and before the mayor had both feet on the ground, she looked across the entrance and saw Marcus. Her eyes lit up. "Marcus," she shouted. Not hello, not thank you for coming, not even a handshake. She ran up, ran in heels, through a crowd of donors and board members, and wrapped him in a hug so genuine it looked like something she'd been waiting to do all day. Clark froze. Marcus didn't say a word. The mayor turned to him, still smiling, and said, "I've been telling everyone about you all week. I told them the moment he arrives, make sure he's taken care of. Marcus, come meet the council. She didn't even acknowledge Clark. And that silence, that was the loudest part of all. The velvet rope opened, and Marcus stepped through. Not with a swagger, not with defiance, but with a stillness that carried centuries of restraint, of walking into rooms where he was underestimated, misjudged, sometimes feared, almost always dismissed. But tonight was different. Not because of the chandeliers glittering like frozen fire above him, not because of the gloved waiters offering flutes of champagne to people who rarely drank them, not even because of the live quartet playing soft jazz near the marble fountain. It was different because every eye in that room had just witnessed the mayor greet Marcus like he was the event. People whispered, they turned their heads. Some asked, "Who is he?" And Clark, the event manager who just tried to exile him to the alley, stood frozen by the door, clutching his clipboard like it could somehow erase what just happened. Inside the ballroom, conversations tried to continue. They didn't. The mayor didn't just invite Marcus in. She walked with him, right through the heart of the crowd, her hand lightly on his shoulder like a signal to the room. Pay attention. Marcus walked in silence, but his eyes saw everything. The glance from the old man in the tuxedo near the champagne tower, confused, slightly irritated. The look from the woman in the emerald dress who had pulled her clutch closer to her body as he passed. The whisper from the waiter to another waiter. That's him. And of course Clark pretending to check things on his clipboard while sneaking glances like a student who got caught cheating. "Let me introduce you to the board," the mayor said, smiling, leading Marcus up the shallow stage where a few gray-haired men and women stood huddled, holding wine and wearing the kind of expressions that had never needed to stretch for survival. She didn't bother waiting for their approval. "This," she said, "is Marcus Olanyi, the man whose software saved our city 2 years ago." A pause. He was the architect behind the emergency communication app we now rely on during power outages and medical alerts, the system your offices and hospitals are now required to use. He built it, alone. Marcus smiled modestly. The board members shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, some pretending they'd known that. "And when I asked him to come tonight," the mayor added, "it wasn't just to mingle, it was to honor him. We wouldn't have half the infrastructure we rely on today without his brilliance." Clark heard it all from a distance. His grip on the clipboard loosened. One paper slipped to the floor. He didn't pick it up. Marcus's voice came for the first time, deep and smooth. "I'm grateful to be here. Honestly, I wasn't sure I'd be welcomed at first." The words hung in the air. A few people laughed nervously. A few understood. But Clark swallowed hard. As the mayor led Marcus toward the side lounge where more private conversations took place, guests started to circle him like moths that suddenly noticed the flame. A venture capitalist, a city councilwoman, even a reporter who asked if she could do a quick profile sometime. He politely accepted their greetings, but his gaze occasionally flicked to Clark still by the door, now utterly alone, no longer in charge of the room he once ruled. And then, sweet, poetic timing, a waiter approached Clark. "You forgot to check his name off the list," the waiter said, holding out the clipboard. Clark didn't answer. He just took the clipboard back, nodded, and stared at Marcus from across the room. It wasn't rage, it wasn't jealousy, it was the dull, sick ache of someone who realized they'd played the wrong hand, loudly, publicly, and irreversibly. The moment Marcus found a sliver of quiet near a tall window looking out at the city lights, he exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath since the door. Outside, the city sparkled like a lie, elegant, distant, fair. But Marcus had grown up on the edges of that shine, in the parts of the city where elegance was something you survived, not something you inherited. He leaned against the window frame, untouched glass of champagne in hand. His fingers tapped the side of the flute slowly, like a rhythm he was trying to remember. The world buzzed behind him, polite laughter, designer cologne, conversations about auctions and investments. But Marcus? He wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about the smell of fried plantains in his mother's tiny apartment, about the hum of broken street lamps outside his childhood window, about the kids who teased him for being the one with that weird African name, and teachers who called him Mark without asking, as if Marcus Olanyi didn't belong in their mouths. He remembered his father's hands, rough, calloused from warehouse work, holding his first computer parts like they were sacred. They built his first desktop together with wires held by tape and a motherboard that came from a junkyard tech pile. He was 10. That night, when the system finally turned on and the cracked monitor glowed to life, his father had whispered, "Son, the world is a system. Learn it, and you'll never beg it to let you in." Marcus did. He learned HTML before he hit puberty, built a neighborhood internet mesh for his block, entered a youth competition where judges asked if he really coded that himself. He never forgot that judge's face, the same subtle, polite doubt he saw in Clark's eyes tonight. He thought of all the times he was told he was intimidating just for being focused, how interviews got quiet when he said where he grew up, how investors would say, "You're smart, but maybe if you had a white co-founder." He'd coded his first medical alert system from a shared dorm while working night shifts to pay for school. When he submitted the prototype to a national contest, it got rejected. No reason, no feedback. Months later, he found a suspiciously similar app had launched by the son of a judge who ran that contest. He didn't sue, he just made a better version, the version the mayor ended up using, the one that saved lives during a heatwave power outage 2 years ago. But tonight, Marcus realized something strange. Even after all the wins, that feeling never fully left. That invisible fingerprint they leave on you when they treat you like you're invisible. That's why Clark's words stung, not because he hadn't heard them before, but because he had over and over again, from different faces with the same tone. He sipped the champagne finally. It tasted like nothing, but it was cold and real, and in his hand. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said gently from behind. He turned. An elderly black woman, elegant in a navy gown, stood beside him. Her hair coiled like wisdom itself, and she had a cane but didn't lean on it. Her name tag read, Dr. Eloise Anaba, Civil Rights Council Chair. "I saw what happened," she said softly. "You handled it like a king." Marcus smiled, a little embarrassed. "I'm used to it. That's what makes it hurt," she replied. "You shouldn't be." They stood in silence. Then she added, "They treat us like shadows until they need the light we carry. But you didn't shine just for them tonight, son. You shone for every boy who never saw himself in these rooms." That hit deep. Marcus didn't respond right away. He didn't have to. She gently touched his arm and walked away, cane clicking gently on the floor. He stood there a little longer, not because he didn't have anything else to do, but because this moment wasn't about the mayor or the event or Clark. It was for the little boy who used to fix broken keyboards for neighbors in exchange for internet hours. It was for the man he almost became, the one who might have let nights like this break him, but he didn't. The hum of the ballroom had shifted. The people who once pretended not to notice Marcus now lingered within earshot of wherever he moved. It was the classic ripple effect. The man they ignored at the door was now the name on everyone's lips, whispers laced with curiosity, guilt, and the quiet panic of sudden self-awareness. Marcus, meanwhile, remained still, calm, almost too calm, his back straight, shoulders at ease, the man who had earned the storm's respect by standing in it without blinking. Clark reappeared, not with the clipboard this time. Now his tie was slightly loosened, and that forced smile, thin, quivering at the corners, was glued to his face like a last defense. "There you are," Clark said, approaching with a waiter's cheer. "Apologies again about earlier, just a bit of a mix-up. You know how these guest lists can be messy." Marcus tilted his head. "Messy?" "Yeah," Clark chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, so many names, high security, protocols, all that. Nothing personal." Marcus's silence swallowed the room around them. People turned. They weren't pretending not to listen this time. Clark pushed on nervously. "Anyway, glad everything's sorted. Drinks are flowing, guests are happy. All good?" Still, Marcus didn't speak. Not yet. He just looked at Clark with the quiet steadiness of someone measuring not just a man, but his motives, his legacy, his fear. That's when the mayor's voice rang through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" Every head turned toward the stage. She stood beneath the soft chandelier glow, her smile deliberate, eyes warm but fierce. "I promised you all a memorable night, and tonight I'd like to ask someone very special to share a few words." The room shifted again. Clark stiffened. The mayor extended her arm toward Marcus. "Mr. Marcus Olaniyi, would you honor us?" Marcus blinked, just once. He didn't look at Clark. He didn't say a word. He simply walked past him like he didn't exist. The silence in the ballroom was thunderous. He stepped onto the stage, measured, proud. He took the mic with one hand, his fingers steady. His voice? Low, smooth, calm. "I wasn't on the guest list tonight." Dead silence. "I wasn't expected to be in this room. Not because I lacked credentials, but because I didn't look the part. I didn't sound like who they thought mattered." Clark shifted uncomfortably, trying not to be seen. "When I was 12, I coded my first emergency response app using scrap parts from the back of a repair shop. No one asked how. They just assumed I didn't." A pause. "That pattern followed me into high school, where I was called urban, into college, where I was called an exception, into job interviews, where I was always almost hired until they went in a different direction. The crowd now leaned forward. But let me be clear, tonight isn't about revenge, it's about reminder. That brilliance doesn't wear a uniform. That kindness doesn't always speak with a silver tongue. That genius can grow in silence, in shadows, in places where the world forgets to look. A gasp, a hand over a heart. Someone dabbed their eyes. So if you see someone at your door next time who doesn't look like money or pedigree, pause, not with suspicion, but with humility, because you never know if the person you're about to dismiss might be the one you'll be quoting 5 years from now. The room erupted, not in claps at first, but in stillness, reverence, and then the applause came. Loud, reluctant in some corners, roaring in others. The mayor stood proud. Dr. Anabar wiped her cheek. Clark, he clapped too, but the sound of his hands was the loneliest noise in the room. Because Marcus didn't just speak tonight, he carved his voice into their memory. He walked off the stage like a king who had just claimed territory without raising his voice, only his truth. The applause had faded. The speeches were done. The event buzz had returned to wine glasses and murmurs. But something had shifted permanently. Marcus didn't linger on the stage. He didn't need to. As he stepped down, people made space for him, the way you do when someone stops being a name and becomes a moment. Some gave sheepish nods. Others smiled with deep admiration. A few tried too hard to look friendly, overcompensating with gestures that came too late. But Marcus? He didn't perform. He didn't preen. He just nodded politely, offering that same still, unshakable grace that had held him steady through humiliation. His path across the room was quiet, but every eye followed him. Even those who had once dismissed him from a distance now craned their necks just to see where he would go. And then Clark, still standing by the drink table, palms sweating around his untouched glass of sparkling water. He hadn't moved since the speech. He couldn't. His world had tipped. For a moment, their eyes met. Marcus didn't look angry. He didn't even smirk. He just held Clark's gaze the way a storm holds the ocean, calm, massive, and beyond retaliation. Then, with the tiniest nod, not of forgiveness but of finality, he walked past him. It was the walk of a man who didn't need revenge. He was already above it. Near the exit, a group of black event staff, the caterers, the valet, the lighting team, had gathered quietly, eyes shining. They had seen the whole thing, not just what Marcus said, but what he meant, who he was. One young man stepped forward, nervous. He couldn't have been more than 20. "Sir," he said quietly, holding out a hand, "just thank you." Marcus paused, then shook it. Firm, warm, equal. "I've got an internship program starting next month," Marcus said. "Come find me." The young man nearly teared up. Outside, the air was cool. Marcus stepped into the night as the city lights blinked gently above. A luxury sedan waited at the curb, sent by the mayor, no doubt, but Marcus didn't move toward it just yet. Instead, he stood still on the sidewalk, letting the breeze hit his face. Not long ago, he would have taken the bus home from tech meetups where no one remembered his name. Now he walked out of rooms with his name etched into the walls. He pulled out his phone, not to check messages or take pictures, but to call his father. A voice crackled through. "You good, son?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, Pops, I'm real good." And with that he slipped into the car. The door shut gently. The lights turned green, and the man who once fixed computers in a broken apartment rode off not in victory, but in purpose. Imagine that, being told without words that you don't belong, being scanned like luggage, blocked like a threat, because of the way you look, because of the assumptions stitched into their eyes, and then rising anyway. Tonight, Marcus didn't just walk through a door, he broke a ceiling they didn't even know was there. He didn't clap back with rage, he didn't scream for justice, he stood in his truth, calm, brilliant, unbothered, and let his story speak louder than their assumptions. And for every person who's ever been told you're not supposed to be here, for every voice dismissed, every name mispronounced, every dream that got laughed at, this story was for you, because one day the very people who overlooked you will strain to remember how they ever dared to ignore you. So if this story touched something in you, if you've ever been Marcus or known someone like him, like the video, subscribe, not for numbers, but because these are the stories that deserve to be remembered. Comment below, "They can't ignore us forever," and share this with someone who's ready to walk into their own ballroom moment. This wasn't just a story, it was a warning to every system that still thinks power comes from exclusion. We are done knocking, we're walking in, and we're bringing everyone with us.